Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge Podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Childcare Bridge. Today's topic is around a couple of pivots, a couple of tweaks that we made to the hiring process for a childcare center that had 4 locations that was just massively struggling. They approached us and said, Michael and team, we have no problem getting a ridiculously large quantity of candidates. We get a ton of applicants, but the quality of the applicants isn't there. And then the quality side, when they do find some of those people, they're saying they no-show to interviews. If they do get hired, they walk in, spend a few hours, go to lunch, never come back. It was an absolute mess. Absolute mess. And I wanted to look at what are some of the changes that we could rapidly make. But I'm all about this process of getting to a root issue. There's always issues at a business, and I wouldn't say that I love challenges or issues, but I always use the phrase, no problem, no business. Like, you're always gonna have problems and challenges, otherwise you really don't have a business, like nothing's ever smooth. But when I started to peel back the different layers of the onion, and we started with the issue of we can't find high quality people and then retain those people. What we wanted to do before starting to just put them through our process was we wanted to do a deep dive. And where do you think we started? We started with applicants that came to work that never returned. We started with applicants that filled out things that never decided to come to an interview. And then we pivoted over to the team. And so, Michael, how did you get people that never ended up joining that company to get on the phone with you? Well, we bribed them. We offered them a gift card. And we followed through with that. We didn't just, and we made it a hefty amount. I believe it was $20 or $25. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you multiply that by 30, 40, 50 people, I think we sent out, $1,200 in gift cards. But the data that we got, I would argue, will serve this center forever because it allowed us to completely pivot the entire process. Not just by applying our process, but realizing that things were broken. So I'm not going to go through all the questions that we asked, but we would ask some generic things just to kind of start the conversation. Tell me a little bit more about your background. And then we would kind of not push the conversation along, but we would aim to get it to the place where, depending on the type of person, like if you were hired and then you came in, then you went to lunch and never came back, can you tell us some more, like what happened? And we started to hear similar stories. We started to hear things like the job description and what I was being asked to do were drastically different. We were being told things like, well, I agreed to $15 an hour, but then I was getting other offers or other jobs and seeing things that were $19 an hour. To things like, then they didn't use the word culture. Not everyone uses the word culture, but they alluded to things around the culture that it didn't seem like a really amazing place. And it was interesting because I then asked the similar questions to the current staff. And I didn't say, well, why did you come and leave? Because they're still there. But I'd say, well, why do you enjoy working here? Like, tell me what you like about it. And then I would ask the opposite question. Are there any things that you don't love? And that started to get a lot more response. Well, I don't like this, that, I was promised this, and I didn't think we were going to have a mutiny at our hands, and that's not to the level that it got, but it very rapidly started to reveal some things. So before you can even look at hiring and attracting and retaining really great people, you have to look inward. And I'm going through this exact same exercise myself as we speak. Literally the exact same exercise. We don't have a hard time attracting or retaining people. We're going through a few different issues where we have a hard time of people being highly self-accountable and not being a perfect culture fit like we originally had thought, to where we think we made mistakes when it comes to hiring. So I had to start to look inward. And we very rapidly realized that there was some friction. Anytime that there's friction anywhere within a hiring process or an onboarding process, mistakes happen, people change their mind, and it just doesn't work in our favor. And I realized with our stuff that the friction was the onboarding process wasn't completely dialed in, so they knew all of their expectations. There were a lot of unwritten rules that we had at our organization, and our core values, while they're apparent and the people knew them and coming in, they would read about them and hear about them like the first day, and then we weren't continuing to make sure that that was top of mind. And one of our biggest core values is act like owners. And that's a lot around self-accountability and making decisions and speed of implementation. So we started to improve that. So before we started to try and figure out, well, are we hiring the wrong people? Like, what's going on here? We had to look inward. And with this center, we had to have some really not fun conversations with the owners. Say, here are the findings. And they were initially in shock. And I wouldn't say that they were in denial, but I don't think they realized that it was as bad as people were saying. But unfortunately for them, I had black and white data of recorded conversations. And with the team, I agreed to keep their names off the record. And there was no identifying information so that the staff knew there could be no repercussions. That's another key thing, a key point for you to remember is that anytime you're doing employee surveys, you've got to keep them anonymous. Otherwise, you're not going to get the feedback to the level that you're looking for. People, they're going to sugarcoat and they're going to say, oh, everything is amazing. But in reality, they're like, yeah, I actually hate it here and I've been looking for another job for the last 3 months. So you got to make sure they're anonymous. So what did we do? And then how did that then transform things to where we now have a waiting list of staff? A lot of centers aspire to have a waiting list of families. They have a bench of directors that they can tap and hire at any point. They have a bench of chefs, assistant teachers, regular teachers, admin assistants, sales. We've got a bench that they could open up multiple more locations and be able to start bringing these people in close to immediately. So Michael, what changed? So we did a few things. First, we did a heavy rebrand on all things culture, but also, I'm trying to find the right word, we just reorganized everything when it came to the culture to make sure that we were actually being authentic. I think that's the word I'm looking for, that the authenticity of these core values that they had actually rang true to the staff and then the new hires when they came in. So if we were saying one of our core values is fun, and the team is like, psh, that's one of the core values. Like, I can't tell you the last time that I've even laughed at this job. We realized that we had to make some internal shifts between the management team and the directors to start to move those things in the right direction and have an action plan over 90 days to kind of right that ship. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing that they did that correlates to something else was we raised the tuition. So Michael, what does it have to do with hiring? Right now, centers are not making the amount of money that they should be making. That goes for 90+% of the centers. You are not making the amount of money that you deserve to be making, that you should be making. It just, the money doesn't add up for the stress, the anxiety, everything that you have to carry. The physical toll that it takes on you, it just doesn't add up. Like, the numbers don't check out. So we raised the tuition so that we could then take that money and move the majority of that into getting the wages of the current staff in a better spot. So we realized that a lot of their current team, the amount of money that they were making compared to new hires, in some cases, you had people that were there for 3 years that were making $3-4 an hour less for the exact same job as a new hire. So what do you think that does by way of culture and morale when someone goes to Indeed and they see you're advertising $18 to $21 an hour and they're like, yeah, I'm making 14. So we had to find money, because it's not an easy sell for me to go and say, raise everyone's pay. And they're like, Michael, we barely made any money as it is. And they're going through rapid expansion. So that's another reason why they didn't have a ton of extra capital. But in raising the tuition 5%, we started to produce enough that we could start to move that across the team and get them on a path to where they were making the amount of money that they wanted. With that, then, we were able to make sure that the new people that were coming in we could give them the amount of money that was being promised in these different job ads. So they didn't come in and think that one thing was going to be happening in an interview and they're like, hey, would you take 13? They're like, well, the job ad said 16. I guess I'll take 13. We were able to actually give them what was being promised. And then when you line that up with some of the culture shifts, they could feel it when they were coming in for their first day, their first week, their first month. They could read about it in the job description because now the job description could actually be authentic. They were using copy and paste job descriptions like most centers use, throwing them in all the same places, just wasn't moving the needle. But now they had the right amount of pay, so they weren't at the top of the market, they weren't at the bottom, they were in the middle or a little bit higher towards the top. But the culture aspect really started to move things in the right direction on the retention side. If people are feeling like they're well compensated and they can start to feel the culture, authentically feel it, that can buy you a lot of time to continue figuring things out. And then once we had those things nailed, we started to invest and treat the hiring of staff as a marketing function. We started to invest thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Why would we do that? Well, we would do that because we know that for every teacher that we bring in, we can make another $8,000 of revenue. For every assistant we bring in, we can add $10,000 in revenue, for example. Just giving you different type, like they started to see what it was costing them to not have those staff. And then also the rapid turnover. Well, every person you need to replace was costing on average of $5,000. When they started to think about that and start to have tunnel vision of, we really need to solve this once and for all, they solved it by the culture side of things, raising pay across the boards, and then treating hiring, and we did all the hiring for them and with them through our agency, but they treated that as just as serious as us driving and attracting new enrollments. That every potential applicant was the same thing as a potential new family in the door, that they were getting treated with the same level of urgency, respect. They weren't saying, can you come for an interview in 3 weeks? They were saying, are you free tomorrow afternoon? We're gonna revise our schedule so that we can accommodate the time that you're looking for. They treated that literally as the same as if that person was coming to give them $1,500 a month for their tuition, and they just felt like a VIP. And then we added on fun little things that no one else was doing. For example, we had a fun sign when they were coming to park. We knew they'd be showing up, VIP parking for XYZ person. We had a little swag bag that they were getting, even if they didn't end up joining with us. Like, what's it going to cost? Like, they're at the very least going to show their friends and family they got this cool little swag bag. And it wasn't just swag of the center. It had, I think, a Starbucks or a local gift card in it. Like, nothing crazy. I mean, they were give or take $20 to put together, but doing things that were going above and beyond. And now, again, we've got it to the place where they have a bench. These things are all possible, but you have to start to look internally to see what is that root issue that we need to solve. Is it the culture? Is it pay? Is it the job itself? Is it the ratios? Like you got to have that tunnel vision to really start to get to the root cause. You do that by getting anonymous feedback from current people that didn't come, and then you start to work at solving it piece by piece by piece, and you'll start to see things transform. It won't be overnight, but you'll start to see things to the place where you can now hire and retain all the best people that you could ever want. Get out there, find those staff that are going to make your life so much easier. And as always, if we can help you, feel free to reach out. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'll see you next week.